Good morning, everyone. My name is Sara Moller, and I'm a core faculty member in the Security Studies program here at the Walsh School of Foreign Service. I'm delighted to welcome you all, both those joining us in person here this morning in historic Gaston Hall, as well as those tuning in virtually from around the world to our conference on NATO at 75, Charting a New Course. 75 years ago last week, not too far from where we are meeting now, representatives from 12 North Atlantic countries came together in downtown Washington to affirm their resolve to unite their efforts for collective security and defense and preserve the peace and security of the Atlantic community, an association born of war designed to fortify peace. In the words of Secretary Acheson, who signed the treaty on behalf of the government and people of the United States, the purpose of the North Atlantic Pact was twofold. For those who seek peace, it is a guide to refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. For those who set their feet upon the path of aggression, it is a warning that if it must needs be that offenses come, then woe unto them by whom the offense cometh. This duality of purpose, a desire for peace while being prepared for war, has guided the alliance ever since, peace through security. Indeed, the NATO flag and emblem, featuring a star representing a compass, symbolizes the peaceful purpose of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. As explained by Lord Ismay, the Alliance's first Secretary General, the compass star guides NATO towards peace, while the circle signifies the unity among the Alliance's members. As a political military alliance, NATO is also unique in that its members have pledged not only to uphold the principle of collective defense and guarantee each other's security, but also their shared determination to safeguard the freedom and prosperity of their peoples, a freedom founded on the principles of democracy, individual liberty, and the rule of law. This hybrid political-military identity has at times been a source of tension within the alliance. Over the course of the past 7.5 decades, the alliance has often had to navigate the delicate balance between political and military priorities as it sought to fulfill its chief purpose and safeguard the peace, freedom, and security of its members. A tension that persists within the alliance today, and one I'm sure we'll hear more about over the course of the day. Following the end of the Cold War, NATO added two core tasks, crisis prevention and management, and cooperative security to its original focus on deterrence and defense. And for a brief period, NATO could direct its attention and energies towards out-of-area operations and expeditionary missions, secure in the belief that Europe was whole and free. But history has now caught up with the alliance, and today Russia is once again threatening Europe and the wider Atlantic community. As a consequence, the alliance has returned to its original purpose, deterring and defending the Euro-Atlantic area. At the same time, the alliance faces other threats and challenges, the persistent threat of terrorism, and the growing assertiveness of China, whose ambitions and coercive policies, as the 2022 NATO strategic concept stated, directly challenges the interests, values, and security of the alliance. Along with managing these challenges, NATO must also confront one of the defining issues of our time, the impact of climate change. That's quite a crowded agenda. There have been other significant changes along the way as well. 75 years on from its founding, the alliance is larger than ever, having added 20 additional members in the intervening decades, most recently Sweden last month, and several partner countries like the AP4. And as we'll hear this morning and afternoon, the alliance is not only larger than ever, but it is also actively working on becoming stronger than ever. Navigating the complex and often turbulent waters of today's international security environment, while learning from past experiences and remaining agile enough to adapt to future contingencies, is NATO's central challenge today. Over the course of the day, we'll have the privilege of hearing from many distinguished alliance practitioners and NATO scholars, each offering their unique insights and perspectives on these and other pressing issues. In a moment, we'll have the opportunity to hear directly from the U.S. Permanent Representative to NATO, Ambassador Julianne Smith, who will share her perspective and provide insights on last week's NATO's Foreign Ministerial meeting, as well as a preview of the upcoming agenda for the July Washington Summit. Following her prepared remarks, Ambassador Smith will take questions from the audience in the room. The afternoon keynote address will be delivered by Supreme Allied Commander General Christopher Cavoli, who will also take questions from those in attendance here today. And to facilitate this, we're excited to introduce a new format for audience members to submit their questions in advance. At least it's new for me. The QR code that you see displayed before you on the two screens enables you to submit questions throughout the day ahead of this afternoon's session, ensuring we can incorporate as many questions from the audience as possible during our brief time with SACEUR Cavoli. I encourage you to make use of this opportunity during the breaks in today's program. Organizing an event of this caliber and size, as I'm sure you can imagine, requires all hands on deck, and there were many individuals who were involved in making today possible. I want to begin by thanking my colleagues from the Security Studies program, especially Professors Stephen Flanagan and Heidi Urban. They have been my guiding North Stars since we embarked on planning this conference nearly 10 months ago, and along the way they have offered steady direction and been a constant source of advice, for which I'm deeply appreciative. I also want to express my gratitude to Jenna DeFossi and Abby Frameth from the Center for Security Studies, who have done an outstanding job making today a reality, and frankly, they've had to put up with far too many emails from me in the process. I'm also grateful to Professors Daniel Byman and Rebecca Patterson, the Director and Associate Director of the Center for Security Studies, for their support, along with the many staff and student volunteers from the program who are helping here today. Thank you all. I also want to thank the many colleagues from across the School of Foreign Service and the wider Georgetown University community for offering their assistance and support. In particular, I'd like to thank Jackson Menner from Protocol and Events and Jacob Mendel from Event Management Services. Thank you both for all of your work. Finally, I want to extend my gratitude to our Georgetown partners, the Moritara Center for International Studies and the BMW Center for German and European Studies, for their generous financial support for today's programming. It's my pleasure to now introduce Dean Joel Hellman, who will offer a few remarks before introducing our first keynote of the day, Ambassador Julianne Smith. Dean Hellman, the helm is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for all the work you've done in organizing what I know will be a fascinating and I'm sure an important day. I want to welcome to you to Georgetown. It seems like a particularly, momentous day because of what we're going to see climactically as well as looking to discuss here in the room. I am going to try to see whether or not the staff can actually get us glasses to look at the eclipse if we have lots of people leaving for about a 15-minute period a little in the afternoon. I don't know if stained glass is also a protective way of looking at the eclipse. But it does feel, it gives this day a little bit more significance. Let me welcome you here for those who have never joined us here on the Georgetown University campus of the School of Foreign Service. Let me tell you a little bit about our school because it is such an honor, a privilege, and indeed for us, very consistent with the mission of why this school was created. You are here at the School of Foreign Service at Georgetown University, which is the oldest school of international affairs in the United States. It was created in 1919 in the immediate aftermath of World War I with a very explicit mission. Our founder on that very day of inaugurating the school said, and I quote, "Unprepared as we were for war, we are resolved never to be unprepared for the peace." And for over 100 years, this school has been training generations of leaders engaging through our scholarship, research, and teaching on the core issues that will preserve the peace, both in the last century and going forward. So it is very much in line with our mission to welcome this discussion on a critical alliance, a critical set of relationships, a critical organization that has worked very much in accordance with this mission to preserve the peace, NATO at 75. We are deeply grateful to be able to host such an extraordinary range of panelists to talk both about the history of NATO, but more importantly, about the future of NATO at such a critical moment. As we all know, NATO has been challenged like never before with an invasion in Europe that was almost unimaginable a few years ago, and yet NATO's resolve has shown to be well beyond the expectations. The unity of NATO, the expansion of NATO has been true to the very mission by which NATO was created. But there are many challenges ahead, and this is an extraordinary opportunity to dig into those challenges, to understand those challenges, and to begin to set the stage for the next 75 years of NATO's efforts to preserve peace. And with that, we want to begin with someone, of course, who knows these issues from the inside out, as you say. We are so pleased to welcome today Ambassador Julianne Smith. She is, as you know, the U.S. permanent representative to NATO, a position that she took on in November 2021, following a long and distinguished career in multiple positions, both engaging in and analyzing the transatlantic relationship. Prior to this position, she served as a senior advisor to Secretary of State Blinken. Before that, she was the director of Asia and Geopolitics programs at the German Marshall Fund of the United States. She was also director of the Transatlantic Security Program at the Center for a New American Security. She also played a number of roles in government. She was acting national security advisor and deputy national security advisor to the vice president of the United States. She served for 3 years as the principal director for European and NATO policy in the Pentagon, for which she was actually awarded the Secretary of Defense's Medal for Exceptional Public Service. And of course, she has held a variety of positions in research institutes here in Washington and beyond, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, the German Marshall Fund, the American Academy in Berlin. So she is uniquely capable of giving us both a perspective on NATO's past and, of course, a glimpse into how the U.S. Is thinking about NATO's future. And we are pleased to moderate this discussion, first in a fireside chat format and then through your questions, to have a truly distinguished member of the International Press Corps, David Sanger. He's the White House and National Security Correspondent for the New York Times, and is one of the organization's most senior writers, having spent 42 years at the New York Times, during which he was associated with a team that has won multiple Pulitzer Prizes. His new book, the fourth book that he is publishing, will come out in April, called, fittingly, New Cold Wars: China's Rise, Russia's Invasion, and the Struggle to Defend the West. He's also written 2 other New York Times bestsellers. He's been bureau chief in Tokyo. He was Washington economic correspondent, the White House correspondent during the Clinton and Bush administrations, and indeed the chief Washington correspondent. So we couldn't have a better interlocutor and moderator for this conversation. And with that, it is my pleasure to welcome Ambassador Julie Smith and David Sanger to the stage to begin the day's proceedings. Thank you very much.
Here for later. Well, good morning, and thanks for coming out early on a Monday morning, and thank you to Joel for that lovely introduction. It is a real pleasure and an honor to open this conference, NATO at 75, Charting a New Course, and I'm very much looking forward to your questions in a few minutes. For 3/4 of a century, NATO has been a cornerstone of international peace and security, uniting nations in a collective commitment to mutual defense and to our shared values. NATO's success story really is remarkable, and it's one that was by no means preordained. The fact that in 2024, 75 years after it was founded, the alliance is bigger, stronger, and more united speaks to the alliance's adaptability. It speaks to NATO's resilience. But it also speaks to the commitment and the courage of millions of soldiers, sailors, aviators that operate together under the NATO umbrella. But I think it also speaks to the attractiveness of NATO's core values: democracy, individual liberty, and the rule of law. Now, I don't have enough time this morning here to go through all of NATO's many achievements over the last 7 decades, and there'll be several panels throughout the day where folks will be allowed to look at the alliance from different angles. It looks like a superb conference and series of discussions, and I congratulate the organizers. But what I do want to do this morning is I want to walk us through all that has happened inside the NATO alliance over just the last 2 years, since Russia launched its unprovoked war of aggression in Ukraine. These last 2 years have in many ways been transformative, and I don't use that word lightly. I don't think there's a better word to describe what's happened across the NATO alliance since the war started. And I think they've showcased time and time again NATO's agility and its innovation. So let me walk you through 5 big changes that we've seen again just in the last 2 years. First, after many, many years of focusing on expeditionary operations, or you'll remember in the 1990s, they were often referred to as out-of-area operations, the alliance has come home and returned to its core mandate of collective defense. And it's taken a series of dramatic steps to enhance its deterrence. Before the war even started, NATO allies were moving force posture into Eastern Europe. You'll remember that NATO, just a few months after the war started, announced 4 new multinational battalions on the eastern flank that were paired with the 4 that were created in the 3 Baltic states and Poland right after Russia went into Crimea in 2014. At the Vilnius summit last year, the alliance also rolled out new regional plans that provide clarity to all allies in terms of what's required to protect every inch of NATO territory. We're also working on an entirely new command and control structure, which I suspect General Cavoli will talk about in his remarks later today. And we just finished conducting our largest military exercise since the Cold War, Steadfast Defender, with 90,000 NATO troops. And that exercise, for the first time in a long time, enabled us to exercise North American troops moving across the Atlantic and into Europe to defend NATO territory. So that's point number 1, dramatic shift or a coming home of sorts to collective defense and enhanced deterrence. Secondly, burden sharing has increased significantly in recent years. You'll remember that in 2014, all allies pledged to spend 2% of their GDP on their own national defense. That pledge was to last 10 years. That brings us to 2024. When we started the pledge 10 years ago, we had 3 countries in the alliance spending 2% of GDP on defense. And by last count, we don't know where we're going to end up by the end of this calendar year, but right now we have 20 allies that are meeting the 2% pledge. 20 allies. That is a significant increase over a decade. Of course, we want it to be all 32, and we're going to keep pushing until we get there. But the movement that we saw over the last 2 years, particularly by countries like Germany, that put an extra 100 billion euros on the table for their own defense after the war started, speaks volumes about where we are on the subject of burden sharing. But when we talk about burden sharing, it's not just about 2% of GDP spending on national defense. Burden sharing also takes us to the question of Ukraine. And here, we're also seeing a remarkable level of burden sharing across the alliance. The United States, over the last 2 years, has provided roughly $74 billion worth of support to our friends in Ukraine. Our European allies collectively have provided somewhere around the order of $110 billion worth of support to Ukraine. Every single member of the alliance is providing assistance to Ukraine, economic, humanitarian, and security assistance. So burden sharing is something that we have seen, an area where we have seen tremendous positive shifts just over the last 2 years. Third, NATO has added 2 new members. You'll remember right after the war started in the spring of 2022, there was a knock at the door, and 2 countries that had hundreds of years of non-alignment decided to shift their national policy and request formal NATO membership. Not in 5 years, not in a decade, not in 2 years, but immediately. They wanted to start the process immediately. As you well know, Finland became an official member last spring, and Sweden just joined officially and now has taken its seat at the table just a couple of weeks ago. And those two allies are already making many meaningful contributions to the alliance each and every day. Number 4, NATO rolled out a new strategic concept in 2022. This is nothing new. NATO rewrites the strategic concept, its core mission statement, about once a decade. What was new about this particular strategic concept was that in addition to mentioning the 2 core threats that the alliance is facing, Russia and terrorism, for the first time in NATO's history, the strategic concept mentions the PRC, challenges associated with the PRC for NATO member states, and the importance of deepening our partnerships with our friends in the Indo-Pacific. Now, why is NATO doing this? Does it have aspirations to become a global alliance and add new members in the Indo-Pacific? Absolutely not. That's not the plan. Our Indo-Pacific partners don't have an interest in joining the alliance, and the alliance is not looking to go global. But what we see is increased utility in working together with our friends in the Indo-Pacific on a number of shared security challenges that really have no geographic boundaries. Disinformation, malicious cyber attacks, or emerging and disruptive technology. We view these security challenges increasingly in one theater and not limited to just the Atlantic or the Pacific. And so NATO is moving out, while it's focused on the war in Ukraine, it is moving out to deepen these important partnerships with our friends in the Indo-Pacific to share best practices and insights on those shared challenges. Finally, NATO, while it has been addressing the challenges in Ukraine and coping with the Russian threat, has taken a series of unprecedented steps to address a wide range of emerging and future challenges. And I'll give you a couple of examples. We have new initiatives across the alliance in 2 new domains, cyber and space. You'll remember when NATO was created, we focused on land, sea, and air. And now increasingly, the alliance is moving out to focus on security threats that exist in cyberspace and in space proper. NATO also recently announced a €1 billion innovation fund to protect our collective technological edge. NATO is in the process of building something called the Defense Innovation Accelerator for the North Atlantic, which has the handy name of Diana, to solve critical defense challenges both with the private sector and with academic institutions. We have expanded our work across the NATO alliance on climate security, but also resilience. We've identified 8 key areas, such as our telecommunication networks, our health systems, or continuity of government, that must remain resilient in the face of any potential attacks. And last summer, we just announced something called the Defense Production Action Plan to ensure that NATO has the industrial capacity and the capabilities that it needs to support its defense plans. So taken together, what does all of this mean for this alliance? The enhanced deterrence, the new resourcing we're seeing, the new members that are still trying to join this alliance, the deeper partnerships with our friends in the Indo-Pacific, and all of the new initiatives that we're rolling out to cope with future challenges. Well, it tells us that at 75, this alliance remains relevant, it remains resilient, and it remains ready for the future. And that's why we look forward to hosting this year's anniversary summit right here in Washington, D.C., July 9th through 11th, where we will no doubt celebrate 75 years of historic achievements, our strong transatlantic bond, and NATO's vital importance in defending against future threats. Now, in addition to the celebration, we of course will be spending a lot of time at the summit focused on Ukraine. I can't predict, none of us can, with any certainty what the war will look like come July. But here's what we do know. All 32 heads of state will be traveling to Washington, D.C. in July to showcase their unwavering unity, their unwavering resolve in helping Ukraine win. We will send a strong signal to President Putin that he can't wait us out. We're not distracted, that we're not looking away, and we may remain focused on Ukraine's immediate and future security needs. And we will take concrete steps at the summit to move Ukraine closer to the alliance and build a bridge to NATO membership. And of course, in addition to Ukraine, the alliance will be making a series of new announcements on many of the subjects I just mentioned. We're rolling out new initiatives as it relates to cyber, to resilience, to climate security, and yes, defense production as well. So let me close just with this. Sometimes I encounter folks that wonder whether NATO's 75 years, whether or not that's some sort of liability. And I have a very short answer on those types of questions. NATO's 75 years of experience, that is not a liability, that is an asset. 75 years of working towards consensus with our closest allies day after day on NATO's core mandate and our future mandates has made unity our greatest strength. Yes, working with 31 other allies day in and day out does have its challenges. It's not always easy to get 32 nations to agree around the table. But when allies put their full weight behind an issue or a position or a new initiative, there's no question that it has both regional and global implications. I think Madeleine Albright, formerly a professor here, of course, and our first female Secretary of State, said it best when she said, "We know that when the democracies of Europe and America are divided, crevices are created through which forces of evil and aggression may emerge. But when we stand together, there's no force on earth more powerful than our solidarity on behalf of freedom." And that's it right there. It's our solidarity, the solidarity that makes NATO stronger and has made NATO one of the most successful alliances in history and one that has made the alliance ready for tomorrow's challenges. Thank you very much. I look forward to your questions.